Welcome to Keystone Connect, a weekly podcast and video series connecting friends to faith, culture, and good vibes. We're here in week 11 now, and I'm here with Ryan King. Ryan King, what do you want to say to our friends here?
You know, I am just glad to be here, man.
Yep.
The weather's hot and sweaty, like my favorite $5 pizza.
Right, $5.55, right?
Is it $5.55 now?
Pretty sure.
This world is full of injustices, and that is the greatest one I've experienced thus far.
So today we're talking about what the combo of opening up has looked like, you know, with the staff and everything, and kind of an under the hood look there. We're hearing from Bob and Bette Nienhuis, who oversee community care, and they do a lot of premarital counseling for people that are in times of grief or anything and everything. So getting some practical advice from them as far as what it looks like during quarantine, what are some trends that they've noticed relationally with people, and how to just trust God during this time. And per usual, we're doing some good news and recommendations, but they're kind of unique and a little different. We're doing a little switch up, you know, kind of like, because you just got to switch things up. Kind of like a chameleon in an art class.
Why is the chameleon in the art class? Why is he switching it up?
The why question is always good, but in this situation, I feel like it's not. Well,
why? Why is the chameleon in an art class?
Because
he doesn't even have thumbs.
He is.
I'm just saying, why is he doing art?
He's struggling being in isolation, and he's forcing himself within an art class that's social distance friendly because he just wants to be around people.
So he's just switching up his coloration because there's a lot of art happening around him?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
I guess so. He's switching it up like a good Christian band that loves surfing.
Right.
Switchfoot.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
And switching it up like I had written this one down, a ninja at a circus.
A ninja at a circus.
Yep, because if he's at a circus, he can't be in the same spot. He's got to wow the audience by coming from somewhere different every time. If someone goes back-to-back nights,
I would go to a ninja circus.
Me too.
I would pay money for that. Not
Absolutely.
right now, because that sounds socially irresponsible.
You're always going to be surprised.
But I would go.
So, Ryan...
Yep.
I don't know if you listened to Randy's message. If you didn't, in the rare chance that you didn't, I'm saying this because he actually didn't this week.
Why are you throwing me under the bus? This is the first time I didn't watch the message in forever.
Yes.
It was the first time. I always have Memorial Day weekend off. I've had that's the one weekend I always take vacation time. And it's just nice to have a little break from work. You know? We built a deck at my parents' house. I was able to read. It was just a good weekend.
I love that.
Here's
Sounds
the thing.
amazing.
I'm excited to engage the questions with you.
Right.
So give me a good synopsis of what was Randy talking about and what were some of the engaging challenges and questions from the talk.
So he talked about perseverance with our faith and how we can come out on the other side a lot better and have learned a lesson. I think the highlight for a lot of people, honestly, was he showed this short video of his grandson overcoming an obstacle. And I'll just leave it at that because if you haven't seen it, I want you to watch it or listen to it.
KeystoneCC.org/messages.
There you go. And it's usually backslash, I feel like, when you hear it. It's /.
I don't know. I think we're forward thinking here at Keystone, so I'd like to believe that's our kind of slash.
Yes. And so he talked about, what are we learning in this season? And what I've really liked is these lunch questions that we've had from a lot of the messages. And so his questions were that to talk over lunch after the service or whenever throughout the week is, what are you going to continue to do after this season of quarantine? What are you going to do more of? And what are you going to do less of? Due to this kind of change of pace and change of a different life that we've all had to shift what's going on. And so what have you kind of learned about yourself during this time? And what I really liked about it and what's crazy is that we're about halfway through 2020.
This has been
wild.
Quite possibly the longest year I've ever experienced.
Right. And I mean, I completely agree. And why I kind of liked it was it allows us midway through the year to kind of check our goals, evaluate ourselves, how are we doing, and who knows how long all of this is going to go on. It's kind of a new normal in a way. And so it helped us evaluate how we're doing this season, how we're going to move forward. So does anything stick out to you in particular of something you're going to do more of, less of, or continue doing after this?
You know what? I think there's been some like abstract concepts for me that I've thought about a lot more during this time, and I think those will blend into like different actions. I think the biggest one is thinking a lot about my identity, and I think this came about because, again, there's this really fascinating saying in one of the Batman movies. I think it's Batman Begins by directed by Christopher Nolan. If you've never seen it, and Batman says this thing. He says, "It's not who you are, it's what you do that defines you." And that's been rattling around a little bit, and I've thought, yeah, that makes sense, because what you do like is the reality of who you are. You know, it's the almost like the action of who you are. But who are you in a time where you're limited in the things you can do?
Yeah.
So when you can't socialize the way you can, here at Keystone, I haven't been able to see my students in the normal way, play music bi-weekly. You know, it changes up what you're able to do and what you've done. So then who are you? And I think for me, I've had to wrestle down almost this idea of like my own self-affirmation can't come from my students, can't come from my church, can't come from my friends because I'm not with them. So that affirmation and identity has to come from within, and also has to come from, most importantly, Christ.
Yeah.
So the way that's like bled itself out is honestly, and this is always such a Christian cliche, but just reading the Bible more and reading it within the right context to actually understand what God's trying to say to the people during that time, and what I can learn from that and how I can wrestle with that.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to find my identity. And just like sometimes believing that I'm loved and believing what I'm doing is good enough. And I think that just comes out in like a lot of thought, like instead of like self-depreciation, instead of being like, you know, you're doing your best, you're doing as best you can with the circumstances given. If in more practical things, if you're looking for practical things, I've honestly just enjoyed like reading more. I've enjoyed being able to just like sit back and relax and just, I don't think I've done anything all too radically different. And maybe this is egotistical because I feel like I was working on that, like that work-life balance, that social life balance before all this happened. And this just kind of was the next like exit off into figuring that out.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes any sense or whatnot.
Sense. I mean, everyone's gonna, I think it's important to know that we're all developing and working on things during this time. And if I would love to hear from some of the Keystone Connect community. If you can comment as far as, you know, what's that one thing you want to do more of, less of, and continue doing, that would be awesome to just hear from you. I'd love to talk about some of those things in our next episode and just bring them up, being like, this person is doing more of this or less of this, and just to get the ideas flowing. But
what do those things look like for you? Like what, with those questions, what inspired you? What did you notice within yourself that you're looking to achieve or change?
Yeah, I think, and it's similar to yours of just spending more time in the Word. I'm doing this read the Bible through in a year plan, and I was like, I should probably do that in 2 years so I can maybe chew on it a little more. But it was partially that, but partially I feel like just because I was being kind of lazy. And I'm like, if this is really the most important thing for me, I need to make sure that I can do it and do it well each and every day, especially given like that I work for a church, right?
Yeah.
Like it's important for me to really chew on this and understand this so I can communicate it as well in whatever way, in my job or in relationships or whatever. And I've really enjoyed taking that time and making that coffee. I learned how to do French press.
There we go. I have too.
That was cool.
I have too. I had one for a while, and I don't love coffee. I love coffee creamer. But doing the French press has been quite fun.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, I think like even what you're saying, like I love either making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning, reading the Bible. And when you were even just speaking, I was thinking about one of the things that inspired me, and one thing like I think people get afraid of when they read the Bible is getting it right. Like what truth is the right truth, or am I reading this thing the right way? And remembering that God's people in the Old Testament, they are the nation of Israel. And Israel was this character, but the name Israel literally means wrestles with God.
Yeah.
And I think like God's people, their name wasn't follows God. Their name wasn't
loves God.
Respects God, loves God. It was wrestles with God. And there's inspiration in that. And like that's where the growth is in the wrestling, and that's where we find, again, identity and whatnot. And I just think it's really cool to hear you doing that and wanting to learn more.
I think one really good thing that I've learned in this time was I deleted Facebook, Instagram, like basically those social media. Those were the main social media apps that I was on, and what I've noticed is it allows me to invest more in the people around me, because my thought space, I'm thinking about just other people more often versus like any time during downtime getting on my phone and scrolling through stuff. That just takes mental space from you, you know? And so I like went on a bike ride with one of my friends that I see every probably 3 weeks, 2 weeks, because we we'll just text each other on a day, be like, hey, you want to go on a road bike ride today? And he told me about a job interview he had 2 weeks ago. And I told him, I was like, hey, let me know how it goes. And it's okay that he didn't, but I just remembered 2 weeks later to just text him, because I was just thinking about it as I was, I don't know, washing a dish or something, you know, or like just having, like, so my mental space has been more focused on the people around me, and that's something I really care about moving forward and want to continue to protect. And it's not like, I don't want to say social media is a bad thing. I don't think it is. It got to a bad space for me in comparison.
It's a neutral thing that your actions dictate where it goes. Yeah,
exactly. And that's just one thing I've noticed that I really appreciated.
Yeah, so I think that's super cool, and I love what you're talking about. Like, when you free up that mental space, it's not cluttered with the day-to-day work and busyness. It's not cluttered with the social media. You're able to care for people better. You're able to think about people more and be more empathetic. And I think I've learned so much of that from Bob and Betty Jo, is their intentionality, the way that they listen, the way that I just feel like, whether I don't know if they're on social media or not, I don't think they are, or else I'm going to hit that follow, but I feel like they do that really, really well, and I'm really excited for the interview we have with them. I don't know if you want to segue into that, and then we can come back and talk about what's happening next at Keystone.
I'm here with Bob and Bette Jo Nienhuis. And did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Great.
Awesome.
Which it also means, I remember you said what Nienhuis means the other day.
New house.
New house. Have you moved into a new house recently?
Actually, it goes a little farther back than that.
Oh, okay.
It goes back to the Netherlands.
Oh, okay. So
it's not just us.
So your ancestors built a lot of houses.
Apparently.
Okay. Or moved a lot.
Or moved
Either one.
They're on the run a lot, probably.
So Bob and Bette Jo have moved to Keystone temporarily for a couple minutes to join me for an interview. And kind of how this started is, Bob, you brought up a really good point at one of our staff meetings about God's sovereignty being our sanity. Can you talk and explain that a little bit more, like you talked to the staff about it?
Yeah, I think it's a great line just to remember that God's sovereignty is our sanity. When we find ourselves in uncertain circumstances, or we're fearful or we're anxious, to remember that in the end, God is still sovereign. He's still sovereign over all things that are happening. And that means that even if I don't know what's going on, even if I'm not sure how to handle it, God is still there, and I can trust him in the midst of my uncertainty or my anxiety.
Yeah, I remember Brady brought up in a meeting as well how a lot of people think in times such as this, they're like, how can you believe in a God? But honestly, believing in God's sovereignty in this time is the best possible option, because it's the belief that there's some sort of purpose. We can't really understand it, rather than the belief that we're just like, what's going on? You know?
If you don't have God's sovereignty, the logical opposite of that is going to be randomness or fate.
Yeah.
And I choose God's sovereignty. I'd rather have that, to know that there is someone who is in control of things, rather than believing that this just happens and you never know, and that there is nothing that can be controlling it.
So a question that often comes along with that, however, is, does that mean that God has caused this?
Yeah, I hear that too, and I think we have to be careful that sovereignty and causality are not necessarily combined there. That certainly God is in control of all things. He is sovereign over all things, but it doesn't mean he is causing everything. He doesn't sit in heaven and say, today it's dandelions and Eric and Tara's yard, and so he sends a whole bunch down there.
Yeah, that'd be pretty brutal.
Good.
So
That's part of the fact that we live in a world that's waiting for what theologians call the consummation, the end, the new heaven and the new earth.
So you two have been going through counseling with a variety of people, couples, singles, people to be married like myself and Tara, people maybe considering a divorce, unfortunately, during this time. Tell me a little bit about what that conversation has looked like during quarantine, as far as whether it's relationships, being single, and how you've helped people in this time where they've been very limited in the people that they're seeing and how they're spending their time, and it's kind of felt like the same. Some people are kind of all out of whack. So what have you noticed in like some of these trends, and what's some of the advice that you're giving them?
I think that one of the most common things that happens is people focus on their circumstance and they forget the truth of other things that surround them. So focused on circumstances. And so if I can help them to refocus on the fact that God's in control, there's someone else in charge here, and it's not just the circumstances that are running it. That's a beginning point. I think that's foundational. Help them to know what their thoughts and what their focus is on.
Yeah.
But the other thing I like to focus on is living a life of gratitude. Because even though things aren't the way we want them right now, there's always something that we can be grateful for.
Yeah.
And if we can train our minds to think about positive things versus all negative, I think that's where our heart goes if we focus on that.
Yeah. Do you have any like practical steps that you've taken in gratitude and how to like work that into your day?
I like to keep a list. I think that's a journal that. Another way that has been important to me is put a sign by my desk that tells me where I want my focus to be.
I think also we need to understand that these are difficult circumstances for a lot of people, and so the weaknesses tend to blossom. If a marriage is stressed, when you're confined now to being together all the time, the weaknesses blossom. If I have an addiction problem, the weakness blossoms at this point. And so first of all, and if people, especially parents who are trying to educate their children when they're not teachers by trade, they feel like failures oftentimes. I think part of it is to say, we understand that, but you don't have to live in that moment of weakness or despair or failure. And how do we begin to turn their attention away from things that aren't good to, again, looking at a God we can trust, and the good things that have happened to us. And sometimes it's just a matter of taking care of yourself for a moment.
It goes always back to purpose. Why are we here in the first place? And what are we all about? And I think we don't often stop to think about that.
Yeah.
It's also important to remember we don't have to live perfectly in order to be God's child. And when we do mess up, make wrong choices, fail in some way, He still loves us. He's still our Father.
Yeah.
And so it's not that we have to be afraid that somehow He's going to kick us out of the family.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. We are His children.
Well, thanks for coming and taking some time to
thank you.
Connect with Keystone, and we hope you have a great, beautiful / rainy, who knows, but it's warm part of your day.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that interview. I feel like I would have been able to talk to them for like at least 20 more minutes.
Yeah, I think, again, I really value their time and their insight. I think Bob and Bette Jo have a lot of really great wisdom. And I always value the different things they say. And I think they're just really good listeners and can speak well into people's lives.
Yeah, and what we did actually right before that, if you follow us on social media, I've been doing like staff videos highlighting people, and theirs will be coming out probably this next week or so. So you can stay tuned for that to get to know them a little bit more as well.
Keystone CC on Instagram. So talking about Keystone, we are looking at the summer, we're looking at the year, and we're trying to figure out what we're doing here as an organization, how we're going to stay together for our community and bring community together, whatever that looks like. Can you give us any insight on what you've seen at Keystone, and maybe we can dialogue that a little bit?
Yeah, so the conversation has been, with churches opening up in these big gatherings, it's like Brady's mentioned, you're either the hero or kind of the villain. If you're the hero that opens up and everyone's safe, that's great. But in a worst case scenario, let's say it gets out that people got sick through gathering together and 100 people are affected. You don't want to make the news for that. So there's that tension, I feel like, that hero-villain tension, as well as one that we've mentioned is we want to do things quality. We want people to feel connected, and we've tried to kind of nail it down to the core values of why people want to come to Keystone. And that's why we've been kind of adamant that we can't produce something that we want, and for people to be totally comfortable hugging people. Like, we want people to have a great positive experience here, not feeling like we're like directing traffic and getting mad at people getting too close, because that's just kind of not what we're about.
Yeah, and I think it's just hard. Like, these times are super hard, and if there's one thing I can encourage our listeners in, and one thing, like, it's just patience and humility, because
Right.
I think, again, there's a lot of different, and we had a long dialogue before we even started recording today. There's a lot of different opinions out there. I think there's political things have entered into the conversation, and if we can just, as Christians, remain as humble and patient as possible, again, we're just talking about people's safety.
Right.
So how can we do what's best for people in terms of their physical health? Because, again, you and I are young, and maybe COVID doesn't affect us, but who could we pass that to? And, like, there's all those things, and you guys have thought about those things at home. So as Keystone, I really think we're trying to approach that in a safe way and be like, all right, we want to bring community together, but how do we do that safely? And you hit on a really great points, and I think what we're looking at Keystone, maybe this is a sneak peek for a lot of you,
Right.
if you haven't heard, we're hoping to do some outside events kind of in the parking lot where people can choose the distance that they are from people, where we will encourage different levels of safety. We'll encourage a certain amount of people that will gather and do it respectfully and safely. And I'm looking forward to those events.
Yeah, and a sneak peek as well. The ideas have been tossed around in regards to like some sort of tailgate that you talked about in the parking lot. You know, you wear your favorite team, whatever sport you want, cook out, grill out, bring all your own stuff. That should be a lot of fun. We've also talked about some type of worship. We're not sure exactly what that'll look like moving forward, but entering into spaces of people being able to grow in their faith as well as connect. And I'm really looking forward to it. So good laughs always help us, as well as good news per usual.
Good news?
Have one good news of good news. So the nation's imprisonment rate is at its lowest level in more than 2 decades. The greatest decline has come among Black Americans, whose imprisonment rate has decreased 34% since 2006.
I like that.
I like that too.
I'm a fan of
Certified?
less people being imprisoned.
Right.
That is certified
Good news.
good news.
And so there's a link to the article that you can read more about it. I have about 2 paragraphs on it out of a pretty lengthy article I just wanted to read because it helps give perspective. Overall, the U.S. imprisonment rate has been on a downward trajectory for the past decade, though the country still has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Counting all races and ethnicities, the U.S. imprisonment rate fell 17% between 2006 and 2018, from 666 prisoners per 100,000 adults to 555 per 100,000. Okay, the numbers there, 660.
Yeah,
I didn't even notice that.
To 555.
Okay. The imprisonment rate at the end of 2018 was about the same level as in 1995, when there were 556 prisoners per 100,000 adults. Experts have pointed to a variety of possible factors to explain the decrease in imprisonment rate, including the pronounced decline among Black Americans. One especially noteworthy trend has been a steep drop in crime rates since the mid-1990s. The U.S. violent crime rate fell 51% between 1993 and 2018, while the property crime rate decreased 54% during that span, according to the FBI.
And I like this because it's not just a COVID-19 statistic.
Yeah.
I like that this is our trajectory, and that's really, really great. I think there's a lot of press out there where things seem horrible and things are bad, and just this is cool.
Yeah.
And I think we have a lot of work to do. I still think we have a lot of work to do when it comes to things like this, but this is good news. This is good news.
This is good news. And 2 other bits of good news kind of going on locally in the community. I'm still in the process of trying to get some good news and some smiles from people at Keystone to just make a short video so we can see each other in some way during this time.
Yeah.
So even if like you just want to send a picture to nextsteps@keystonecc.org of just smiling or enjoying doing something or being outside, I would love to connect people and just see each other's faces, because I haven't seen a bunch of people from Keystone.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So if you have any good news or just good smiling pictures, send them to nextsteps@keystonecc.org, or just send a text or something to a staff person you know. And next week we're actually going to be talking about the Keystone Community Connector. I kind of coined this phrase. I was pretty proud
of it.
That. Instead of, it's a KCC, but Keystone Community Connector. So it's for anyone that wants to just be on a list of either small businesses or businesses during this time, so that we can look on, like, it can be a resource for the Keystone community to go online. Say you want to eat at a restaurant and just order something to pick up. You're like, oh, it's a Saturday night. I want to see what's on the Keystone Community Connector so I can support someone within the Keystone community that owns their own restaurant.
Yeah.
So it's a way of using the power of a purchase to support other people in the community. Not saying that other people don't matter and other businesses or chains or small businesses or whatever don't matter, but just looking for ways to support people during this time.
I love it. And talking about connecting people, let's connect some words into some sentences. Some sentences to paragraphs. Paragraphs into chapters.
Wow.
Chapters into books. It's
That
time for our
recommendation round. Ryan, I think that was your best transition.
I think the
Holy
transitions
smokes.
and segues are something that's always rattling in the
Yeah.
back of my head. So I'm glad
He's
you guys
good
like
at that.
Now this one I'm really excited about. Eric and I were talking a lot about this subject, but it's a book that myself and a group of other kind of young adult, youth group pastors are reading through, and it is called Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk by the incredible pastor Eugene Show.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He is an awesome guy.
I really like him.
And this book is going to be so critical during 2020 because it's an election year.
Right.
And I know what you're thinking. Your heart is racing. Your anxiety levels are up.
Yeah.
You're going, Ryan, politics at church? What the heck, guy?
Yeah.
What the heck? Well, here's the thing. Politics are part of our lives.
Right. Part of everyone's life.
For all of us, no matter if you're blue, red, or green, no matter where you vote, where you cast your ballot, how you do it, this is just a conversation that we as Christians need to wade into well. And I love this book. Again, it's called Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk. And it's just about how do we enter into this space, into this political landscape that is toxic and horrible and gross, but affects us all, and how do we do it as Christians? And I love this book because he doesn't pick a side. It's just how do we navigate this? And I think this is so critical for us during this. And if you're looking for a way, whether you're Democratic, whether you're Republican, but especially if you're neither, this is going to be so key because it's just a Christian's guide to engaging politics.
I love that. That's so good. I'm definitely going to read it sometime this year. I like him a lot.
It's not a chunky, dense read.
Yeah.
It's pretty, he's got some really great concepts in it. We underline things and highlight things, but it's not like you're not coming away with a headache.
Right.
It's nice to read through. You can hit a chapter in a day. It's really cool.
So. Well, and what's so unfortunate about this time, and we've talked about this, is how it's such a difficult time for so many people, but it's just getting more and more politicized as the days pass.
Yeah.
And it's not just for our election, but especially during this time when there's so much pointing of fingers now, where we need to just be able to not just, I love how frank that is, like, just not be a jerk, but also engage in it in some way and be okay with conversation and be okay with disagreeing. Yeah, I had one recommendation as well. Since it's getting nice out, what I've been using when I'm mountain biking, it's called the All Trails app. And so it shows you all these different trails if you want to hike, or if you want to road bike, or if you want to mountain bike, and all these different things of how to get outside. And what I've been able to go to, like, I went to Rockford, I've went to all these different areas and checked out their mountain bike trails, and I've really enjoyed it.
I'm going to need that.
Yeah.
The trail I'm riding right now by my house, I do not love. It is rough shape, so I would love to see a couple that are closer in my area.
Right, yeah. So there's a couple different ones. I did some researching with a couple different ones because I've been trying some out, and it seems like the All Trails app is definitely a solid one. So yeah, that rounds us up today. I did a couple things, call to action. Let us know what you're doing more of, less of, or continuing to do after quarantine. Would love to share that next week. Share any good news or just some smiles in your faces with someone on staff to share with me, or email it to the Next Steps desk, nextsteps@keystonecc.org. Subscribe so you can just get emails or notifications every time we come out with a video or one of our podcasts. And yeah. Peace out. We'll see you next week.